One.
Today, 8th graders, Middletown Area Middle School, we're going to take a little historical tour and talk about Memorial Day here in Middletown. Come along, let's go for a ride.
He is the only candidate who's pushed for a measured approach.
Turn off my radio there, you'll need to listen to my talk radio. Okay, right now I'm on Pine Street, and Pine Street is named after pine trees. Sometimes history's kind of easy. Roosevelt, named after President Roosevelt from World War II. If you can take a shot over there, Roosevelt and Pine. Okay, now this is the house that my grandfather built. I don't know if you can see that there. He built that back in the 1940s, or early, right, 49 I believe it was. And there was no houses on this street whatsoever. All behind him was cornfields and such. And he thought, and he said to my grandmother, I remember I built here because nobody else will build behind us. And as you know, if you live in Oak Hills, there's a lot of houses behind us. He used to tell stories of the children that used to come down for what we know as Fry Village. And Fry Village used to be an orphanage. It used to be called Fry Orphanage. And that was for orphans. And they used to have apple trees. And they used to come down. And my mom used to tell me used to sell apples to the neighbors and things like that. But later on, the orphanage mansion was knocked down and replaced by Fry Village. So we're going down through Oak Hills, lots of houses. Nice little neighborhood that I live in here. I lived all over the United States. And as you guys know, I grew up in Middletown. I couldn't wait the heck to get out of here. But when it came time to raise a family, I realized that Middletown was an awesome place to raise a family. That's why I came back here. I lived in California, Texas, New Orleans, Connecticut, and Florida, a lot of different places. Now where I'm at right now is called Park Circle. I'm doing a circle, that's Park Circle. And what they used to have here, I don't know if you can see here, the big giant circle we have here. To my right over there is the baseball field, way down over there. But right here, we used to have trolleys back in the 20s, 30s, and that. And trolleys, that's how people used to get around, because not everybody had a car back then. Okay, and what they would do is they would bring the trolleys up the street here, and they would turn the trolleys here or park them. Okay, and this is one of the railroads, not railroads, it was a rail, but it was a trolley rail, and it would take you downtown and uptown, and you go all the way up to Harrisburg on a trolley at one time. Now we're approaching our American Revolution Cemetery. Now this cemetery is dedicated by the Daughters of American Revolution. Ladies out there, if you can go ahead and go back to your ancestry and join this cemetery here. Are you able to get that, George?
Yes.
Okay, good. My daughter's filming for me right now. I'm not filming too, thank you. It's dedicated to the American Revolution, people who fought in it. Now, there's graves. They're all out here. And but all the tombstones were knocked down. And one day, many years ago, if you look at where the Street Harbor store is right now, that used to be a car dealership. And the car dealership somehow bought this lot, and he started knocking the tombstones down, and he was about ready to make a parking lot over top of this. Somebody found out, they stopped him, got the land, and dedicated it to him. So almost history lost there. Okay, it's kind of unique. And as you can see, it's decorated for Memorial Day, and I'll get into that a little bit more. Now, I want to point out this yellow building off to the side here. It's right now it's Middletown Sheet and Fabrication. It's owned by one of my classmates, Jeff Rare. But before that used to be a slaughter yard. Okay, and I don't make it sound excited about that, but it's kind of unique though. If you think about it, back in the early turn of the century, 1900 and that, and before then, they would actually, looking down Pine Street here, if you go straight down Pine Street here, okay, because right here's Main Street, if you go down Pine Street, you'll run into the railroad eventually. They used to drop the cattle off at the railroad and drive hundreds of cattle up the street and Main Street. If you could imagine hundreds of cows, kind of like one of those old Western movies you could see, bringing them up here to the slaughterhouse. Here is what I usually call the lamppost, but now it's called Old Coley. And that was one that stops for the Conestoga wagons, as we talked about in class many times. I know I repeat myself a lot, but it is what it is. So we're going to turn here on Route 230, also known as the King's Highway at one time. This road leads to my east, down this way. East is to E-Town, which is about approximately 15 miles away. A oxen cart drive one day for coming up with the wagons. And up here we come to the famous square of Middletown. 7-Eleven. There used to be a house there. That's where George Washington slept when he came up to put down the Whiskey Rebellion. And right there's Sam Cameron's house, right back there. We talked about that. And here's another stop for Conestoga wagons. It is known now as Hops and Barley. Refabricated many different times. So what we're going to do is we're going to take we're going to go downtown Union Street. Guess what Union Street was named after? The Union Canal. And we have people beautifying the square here. The square has gone through many different changes through the past 100 or so years. Oh, I got Mr. Britcher come up, focus. I don't want people yelling at me. I'm talking too much, as you guys know. So now we're going down Main Street, or Union Street. Now we're going to stop here. Notice these people. No cars are stopping for these people. Once you guys get your license in the next couple of years, you're supposed to stop for these people because it's the law. Okay? You're welcome, buddy. Is that Mr. Pelletier?
Is it?
I can't tell.
I think it might be.
It looks kind of like him. I don't know. He'll be your gym teacher next year. I went to school with Mr. Pelletier too. Okay? Oh, so there we go. Now, I got people behind me, so we're going to kind of drive quickly. Okay? Because this guy in the Ford behind me is kind of like shaking his fist behind me. And so what we're going to do is go downtown Middletown. We'll take a quick tour here. Some of you guys might know where St. Peter's Church is here, up to here. I want to point out this red brick building here that's kind of built like a triangle. That used to be the post office at Middletown one time. And then the post office moved downtown. After it's Victorian. To my left, and his brother's house on to the right. Okay? Those two guys are always in competitions, the Raymonds, okay? And they had a big factory down here, what you guys may know as Carnes. They used to make radiators for the house, not for cars, for the houses, steam heat. And we have Farmers Bank right here, which we know as the Brownstone Cafe. Okay, going downtown. Press and Journal's been around forever, and we're going to take a slight detour here so this guy won't be upset behind me. And we'll go through there. Georgie, how much time do we have on that clock right there?
8 minutes.
8 minutes? Oh, wow. I'm talking. There's Cuppy's Diner. World famous Cuppy's Diner has been on many different restaurant shows and that. Okay. Now, if I was able to come down to, and here's the train station, and I'll point that out. We're moving the train station right next to that famous landmark, as you guys know, as Hardee's. But the trains would stop here, and actually not here. And I'll show you where they used to stop. We'll go back behind Carnes, but this is the train station right now. And Middletown's awesome. One reason why we're awesome because of transportation. We have an international airport. I can fly to almost anywhere in the world from there. I can take a train all the way to San Diego if I want to, or New York. Right now. Well, here's the Mill House. Okay, that's the Interfaith Apartments there. The Mill House. Now, this used to be railroad tracks right here, going across this over here to connect to the railroad line there. But now it's kind of like a garden thing. Now, here's the Mill House I've been talking about in some of my episodes in that. And you can't see it, but that used to be open right there. That little splotch right there. George, see that right there? Get that. That used to be open. And should I put the mirrors in? Would that be better for you?
Yeah, I can
good.
It.
Now, over here, George, take it. Now, see over here. I don't see that drainage. That drainage goes all the way up to Turkey Hill. Also, it goes down river here. You see all the trains right now. At one time, they would be canal boats because they built the railroad on top of canal beds. And we're going to do a little U-turn down here at Huffer Park. Okay, I love Huffer Park. I grew up on the mean streets of Emos, I like to tell people, which is not too mean. But Huffer Park is awesome. And then there's a little fishing. There's a Spontera Creek down there and that, so it's just nice. But as you can see, the railroad over here, George, show them the trains. Okay, and well, that's electric. Okay, but one time, now many of you guys come down Huffer Park and all that. You see these big rocks over here? The stone fortress right there?
Mm-hmm.
You got that? Stone? No, not that stone. Not
Over
right
there?
Yeah, right there. There we go. That would actually is part of a dam. And that dam went all the way across the river, or creek, excuse me, creek. And going across the creek there were stories that my former teachers used to tell me that they used to go swimming there, and it was so deep that you couldn't even touch the bottom. Okay, but as that dam fell down, and it's a really good place to go crayfishing in that. And if you like the crayfish, that's those little things that are awesome eating. Also, right above it, there's some deep holes. So you got to be careful if you're in the creek and that. You don't want to get yourself hurt because there is some spots where you're walking in 3 inches of water, and all of a sudden you're like in 8 feet of water. So you got to be careful when you're out there in the river. Now, the railroad was up there. Now you can see the water line is way down here in the creek, and there's a big difference. With the water, the canal boats would be way above here, and they would travel along the road that I'm driving right now. Okay, and you can see how the creek is probably about 15 feet below me right now driving, but the canal boats were up. They built like a tub of water, if you will, a long tub of water, and they would change different tubs of water, if you will, going up and down so they can move around. Here's another picture of the mill house, and as I told you before, and I'll say it again, the mill house, this has been around since the turn of since 1776, the highest producing flour production in the east coast of America. Okay, very important to the war effort fighting King George, and that's 1776. Our topic right now is the Civil War, and we're kind of really focused with Gettysburg and the Gettysburg Address and that. So now we're coming down the Pennsylvania Railroad. Now the Pennsylvania Railroad was here. Abraham Lincoln, when he came through Middletown a few times. One time on his way down for his inauguration, he came through here, went up to Harrisburg, and then they found out about an assassination plot for Abraham Lincoln in Harrisburg, and they had to sneak him into D.C. in disguise, and people used a term for him called "scaredy cat." There's a famous cartoon with Abraham Lincoln and a cat like hiding in a boxcar, and he's like in a woman's dress. And I got to turn my 4 ways on so these people go by. So Abraham Lincoln came through on his way to become our president. He also came here. His funeral train came through here in Middletown, and people hung flags and banners and waved his train through. And sad time in America. So, okay, let's go through, and what we're going to do is here we're going to go up to Carnes, and this is the underpass. Okay, as you can see, many trucks have trucks that have hit that because again, this bridge and the line for the railroads was built back in the like 1850s and that, and they had no concept of how big trucks and things that could go because everything was pulled by horse and wagon or train. So here we go. Now this over here where it's the record store right now, used to be my dry cleaners. Try to get on top thing with that, George. That used to be a hotel. President McKinley stayed there one time, and he came up to review the troops right before they went off to the take a picture over here too. The war of Spanish-American War around 1898, I think it was. Now we're turning down some more railroad tracks here. This is the Middletown, Humboldt Railroad, but this is Carnes, as we call it. It used to be part of the Raymond Mansion. I showed you that Alfred's Victorian, the house that looks like Alfred's across the street. This is the brothers own this, and they used to make radiators and stoves too. One of those red hot stoves. Right there is one of the Pennsylvania railroad houses. That's where they used to unload cattle. So Now, you get the idea, unloading cattle there, and if you're familiar with this place, they had to drive them all the way up through Main Street and Pine Street to get them up there. Could you imagine? So here we go. Sure, take a picture of that train there coming through. Again, Middletown. It's awesome because we're in the middle of everything. You can hop on a train, and that train is probably going to Philadelphia. And you'll be in Philadelphia probably about an hour and a half with all the stops. You'll be in New York in 3 hours if you want to. Okay? Or maybe it might be going to DC. My daughter's taken that to DC many times. Okay, now we're coming up through here. Now, originally I talked about on Tuesday about Memorial Day. And this is our borough building. If you're ever to come to a borough meeting, you'll get a Middletown staff 1755. Okay? Everybody would gather around here on Monday, approximately around 9 o'clock. You would have Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, the high school band, dignitaries. And what they would do is, in fire trucks, because we always got to have a parade. What's a parade without fire trucks? And then they would gather here and they would start marching up to the cemetery, where I plan on ending up. And I'm going to take you to the parade route right now. But before I go, that's the library, as you guys may know it, but it used to also be the Liberty Firehouse, a fire company there. And the reason why, I'm not going to get into that a little too much, but we'll walk down here. Now, one time we used to have the Elks Theater, one of the oldest operating theaters in America. Unfortunately, it's been closed down and it needs a lot of work. Here's what we call the Brownstone Cafe, which we also known as the Farmers Bank originally. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to turn up here. We're going to pass the tattered flag owned by veterans. When you guys are old enough, I encourage you to stop there. Or have your parents go out with you, okay? Now we're going up Middletown clock. Can you get that, George? Got it?
Kind of.
Kind of. Can you get it or not?
I got my best.
Okay. Well, that clock was dedicated to World War I veterans. As you can see, Middletown has a lot of war references. There's Alfred's Victorian. Let's take a nice view of that. Okay. That's where my first job was. I was a dishwasher when I was about 12 years old. And then there's his brothers across the street. George, can you get that? That's the other Raymond mansion, both built by brothers, and they were kind of competition to each other. I don't know who did it better. It's kind of unique. So we're going up Union Street. And if you take Union Street, you know where you're going to end up? To the high school. That's where you guys are all going next year. Okay? For your freshman year. It's exciting. So I'm taking a leisurely drive up here. Not a lot of cars out today. Thankfully, nobody's beeping at me. So we're going up, and we have, you see, some of these houses are huge. Okay? These houses were built by people that had the wealth, and a lot of them are turned into apartments now. Let's point out to this building right over here, this red brick building. That used to be a distillery, and they used to have their own bottle of type of liquor in that. Okay? Now, here we go. Coming up Main Street. We got our churches here. And can you see that old church chapel at the top? It was built one of the highest places in Middletown. And the reason why I built churches high up like that, so people could see them, identify them, and come from miles around. The old church is the oldest church in Dauphin County. Again, here's the famous landmark, 7-Eleven, where George Washington slept at. Now, he didn't really sleep there, but he slept at the house they knocked down. Okay. There we got the lamppost, or it's called Hops and Barley across the road. All these historical buildings. So, George, when we get up here, if you can, I'm going to try to get the two different things here. Oh, good, you got a red light. Okay. Now, first you got the church, okay, the oldest one in Dauphin County. Okay. Then you got the mayor's house, which is this big house. That used to be a gunsmith place. Okay. Used to make guns called the Pennsylvania Long Rifle. Now I'm going to pull over here right by this Chinese restaurant. Okay. Historical place. But more importantly, historically, is the building across the street, Hetrick Center. My friend in high school lived there for many years until his family moved out, and he became a chef, and he's out in California now. But that house there was the first house in Middletown to have indoor bathroom. You might think, what? Indoor bathroom? Yeah, we talked about that in class many times, like how, you know, people thought like, you know, you go in the bathroom in your house, that's gross. They used to have those chamber pots. And chamber pots, basically, if you had to go at nighttime, you didn't want to go out to your outhouse, you like went into that pot, and what you did the next day, you opened up the window, you tossed it on the street. So, must have been a lot of yuck back then. Okay, so tell you what, we're going to pull through here to the Middletown Cemetery, walking the same route they would do during Memorial Day. How's my time, George?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay, Mr.Britcher can talk a long time. We've got people preparing it. Now, normally you would see lots and lots of more flags out here, and maybe we'll take a little drive through. But here's and I showed you videos of this already, but we got the flags up. The flags are honoring those who served in the military. But Memorial Day is not that. Memorial Day is not just honoring those who served, it's actually honoring those who gave their life in service for their country to protect your rights. Okay? And I know most of you guys probably might not appreciate that, but I'll keep on saying, and someday you might realize how important it is. Okay? So the band would come in, the dignitaries would come in, and I don't want to overpark anybody here, but I think I will. But you can see the flags that are going up, and usually the Boy Scouts would come and put all these flags up. But this year, because of the epidemic, they weren't able to. The Boy Scouts of America said, "Oh, we can't do that. We can't gather these guys together." So one of the scout leaders, Bobby, did it himself, I think, and with a couple other people maybe. But don't be afraid to go out and volunteer. So let's go out and take a quick look out here. Okay, George, we're gonna get out of the car. Okay, I'm gonna leave the car running. I'm gonna leave it off. I'll leave the keys in it. Okay. So let's go and take a look here. So you would have the band would be sitting here, the dignitaries would be up over here. And then they would say a few words, the band would play some songs, say the pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And then we introduce an 8th grader. The 8th grader will come up and recite the Gettysburg Address. And I'll probably play one of those later on. And then they would sit down, and then they would have a few more speeches. And sometimes they would have airplanes flying over doing a flyby, kind of like they did last Tuesday for the nurses and doctors that are working, health professionals that are working in the hospitals. Somber moment. But it's important that you recognize Monday is not about the living, it's about those who made the sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice, that you could be here today, sitting home, doing the things you do. Again, go over to this rock over here where it says GAR. You can see that, George? So it's Grand Army of the Republic. So let's get back in the car. We'll take a little tour. That might be it, but...
Officer within the sound of my voice.
Okay, so are we still filming?
Yep.
Good. Okay, we put our seatbelts on, and let's take a look and notice all the flags, all the veterans. What you can do is just scan out, and we'll try to. Now we're on the top hill here, and I guess I can give you some cemetery history too while we're at it. Okay. Now let's turn here. Now this big post right here. You see the angel up there? It's the highest one in the cemetery. It should be the highest one. Laverty's pretty close. Okay. Now Laverty was a farmer that lived down by the corner by the hops of barley. This is a white house. It was a gray house. Somebody bought it. But this is Young. Young dedicated or donated all this land for the cemetery. And this is his family plot. And I don't know if you can't see, if you look behind me, the top of the hill, the house across from Fry Village was his house. And before they had all these trees here, there's hardly any trees here at all because people cut them down and that firewood. There's more trees in Middletown than there was 150 years ago. Because if I could show you pictures, you'd be like, oh, look at that vacant land. And but now there's a bunch of trees. But that's beside the point. He could see his family plot from his house, from the house that's across from the cemetery. Excuse me, Fry Village. So go ahead and take a scan here, and take a look of all the different, all the flags. Now I believe we're missing some flags because you only put so many up. But let's see. We're going to drive by one of my grandfather's graves and see if he has it there. He lives. He's buried. He's still living in my heart, but he's buried right over here. My grandpa Ryder, buried with his wife, and he's also buried next to his father and mother. And the Ryders are. Yep, he has a flag. Good. Okay, very good. Yep, that's his marker right there. I don't know if you can see it. You want me to take a turn?
Yeah, take a turn.
Let's not knock over any tombstone. Oh, there. How's that?
Yeah, there we go.
There's Grandpa Ryder. Firefighter. In fact, when he retired, he was the chief of the airport firefighter. He was in what they known as the Army Air Corps during World War II. And he there wasn't no Air Force during World War II. It was part of the Army, and later on they broke it up and then they called it the Air Force. So he served in World War II, and next is my Grandpa Ryder, great-grandpa Clayton. They used to live on TMI, before it was TMI, 3 Mile Island, and he had a pig farm there. And he would tell me stories of him catching fish and stuff. Shad, which no longer really runs anymore. He used to catch them by the hundreds, and that was one of his jobs as a little boy, catching shad. He used to run fishing lines across the river, and hundreds of lines, hundreds of hooks, and make barrels and barrels of shad, oily fish. But if you notice, there's lots and lots of people who took the oath to serve the country. Okay, so I got at least a couple generations buried here in Middletown, so that makes me an official Middletowner. That's kind of a joke from the old timers. You know, you're not from Middletown unless you got, I think it's 3 generations.
Yeah.
At least 3 is that what it is, Georgie?
It's 3, John.
So yeah, I got my grandparents down here, and usually the flags are marked a little better. So we're gonna go a little faster down here, and by the military cemetery. I always wave at the grave diggers there, the good people, and so here we go. Thanks for joining me on my little ride here, and now I point out my other grandparents, and this is who built my house, and that's the house that we bought, and from the estate when they died and that, and I need to come and fix some of their flowers there, got a little weeds there. Now my Uncle Bill's buried next to him. That's Botterbush right there. That's Carl. He was also in the Army Air Corps right before World War II, and then he was an engineer and worked on airplanes and that out here at the base, which is the Olmsted Air Force Base. And my Uncle Bill, who fought in Vietnam, unfortunately has died, and he's buried there. So there's a couple generations that we have going on in Middletown. So you notice the flags again. Thank you for your service. But this Monday again, it's not about those who served, those who actually sacrificed. Okay, we honored those who served at school last November, you know, when we did Veterans Day, and hopefully we can do that again. And you know, see, now that right now it's a wheat field, but someday these will be full of graves, all dedicated to the cemetery. Middletown, I believe, right now has more people buried in the cemetery than we have of people. But that's okay, we're an old town. I think we're the oldest town in Dauphin County, 1755. So that's when we were founded. Middletown, as you know, was part of Lancaster County at one time. And after the War of 1776, the American Revolution, Dauphin County was, Lancaster County was so huge they had to split it up. They named it Dauphin, and after the king's son, that's what they call the son of a king, Dauphin. And because France helped us out during World War II, American Revolution helped us out, and so in honor of the king of France, we named it Dauphin. Not the one that swims in the water, but it's a little dolphin. So that basically is going to end our tour here. I'm going to drive out one more time through here, through the cemetery, looking at the flags. We'll look at the memorial one more time, and maybe it's Monday when you get up, you're sleeping in or whatever you guys are doing, because I guess it's almost official beginning of the summer. I think a lot of our summer started back in March 13th. Remember those who sacrificed themselves so you can do what you want to do when you want to do most of the time. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you guys for taking the time to take a little tour with Mr. Britcher, Middletown history. Thank you.